These images shouldn't exist. Rome fell over 1,500 years ago. Yet what you're about to see will make it feel like it happened last week. Real faces, real streets, real moments from the most powerful civilization in human history, captured in photographs and footage that most people never get to see. And one image near the end of this video, showing a Roman street frozen in time, has been called the most haunting photograph ever taken of the ancient world. It contains a secret that connects ancient Rome directly to the space shuttle program, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Before we get to that final image, let's start at the beginning, not the myths, not the paintings, the real Rome. At its peak, the city of Rome held over 1 million people. That number didn't exist anywhere else in the Western world for another 1,000 years after its fall. 1 million people, fed, governed, entertained, all and housed within a single city. Think about what that looked like from street level. Think about the noise, the smell, the chaos of 1 million human beings compressed inside walls, all demanding bread, all demanding entertainment, all demanding power. Now we can actually see it. Early photographic expeditions to Rome, beginning in the 1840s, captured the ruins while they still held their original scale. Massive, uncleared, untouched by modern restoration. What those photographers found on the ground wasn't clean marble the way museums present it. It was overgrown, crumbling, and buried. In some places, ancient Rome lay 9 meters below street level. An entire civilization, swallowed by time, still breathing beneath the city above it. The first photograph in this collection shows the Forum Romanum circa 1865. You're not looking at a museum display. You're looking at the actual floor where Julius Caesar walked, where Cicero gave his speeches that brought senators to their feet in fury, where Mark Antony stood over Caesar's body and turned an entire city against his killers with nothing but words. The fate of the Western world was decided on that ground, in arguments, in betrayals, in blood. And if you look carefully at the left edge of the frame, that's not rubble. Those are the original marble steps of the Temple of Saturn, still there, still standing. 23 centuries old, and a photographer in 1865 simply walked up and pointed a camera at them. The mundanity of that act is what gets me every time. But here's what makes this collection truly disturbing, and I use that word carefully. Several of these photographs show something that modern historians are still debating. Evidence hiding in plain sight, captured on camera over a century ago. That rewrites what we thought we knew about how ordinary Romans actually lived. I'll show you exactly what I mean in about 2 minutes. Keep watching. Rome wasn't architecture, Rome was people. And the early photographs, combined with footage from the late 1800s and early 1900s, captured something remarkable. The descendants of ancient Romans living directly on top of their ancestors' world, often without even realizing it. In one image from 1880, a vegetable vendor sets up his cart just meters from a column that has stood since the reign of Emperor Augustus. The vendor doesn't look at the column. It's just part of the landscape to him, part of the furniture of daily life. The same way New Yorkers walk past skyscrapers without looking up. The same way Parisians ignore the Eiffel Tower on their morning commute. That normalization of ancient greatness is deeply unsettling when you see it in a photograph. Because you're watching someone exist inside history without noticing it, living in the shadow of a world that built roads stretching to Scotland and aqueducts reaching North Africa, and using it as a place to park vegetables. Now, look at this next image, the Colosseum, circa 1870. It's been gutted, the interior marble stripped over centuries by medieval builders who needed materials for churches and palaces. The arena floor, where over 400,000 people and 1 million animals died over 400 years of games, is now open to the sky, exposed, raw, and in the lower right of the frame, 2 men having a casual picnic in the shadow of the outer wall, completely unbothered. This is what civilizational collapse actually looks like. Not dramatic destruction, not fire from the sky, just repurposing, forgetting, life continuing inside the bones of greatness as if the greatness was never there. Games themselves were more brutal than most people realize, and not in a glorified Hollywood way. Not the noble warrior combat that movies sell you, The Roman philosopher Seneca, one of the most educated men of his time, described leaving the arena during the lunch hour break, when the scheduled gladiator matches paused and the real executions began. Not fighters, criminals, prisoners, executed publicly, creatively, elaborately, to screaming applause from tens of thousands of spectators. Seneca wrote that he came home from that afternoon more cruel and inhuman than when he left. He was ashamed of himself, and he went back the next day. This was the entertainment of 1 million people, and the Colosseum in these photographs holds the silence of all of it. Every cheer, every death, every ordinary afternoon of Roman leisure. The stones remember, even when we don't. I want to show you something in the next segment that almost never gets discussed. A photograph taken inside Pompeii in 1863 that permanently changed how archaeologists understood Roman daily life, and it revealed something about ordinary Romans that made the academic world deeply uncomfortable. It's coming up in 60 seconds. On August 24th, 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius gave the people of Pompeii approximately 15 minutes of warning before the pyroclastic surge hit. Not lava, pyroclastic surge, a wall of superheated gas and volcanic material moving at 700 kilometers per hour at a temperature of 300 degrees Celsius. Every person still in the city died instantaneously, muscles contracting in the heat, bodies preserving their final posture as the ash solidified around them like concrete. Photographs from the 1860s excavation captured something the world was genuinely not ready for. Not just the bodies, but the life preserved around them. The streets of Pompeii, photographed in those early expeditions, show stepping stones still perfectly positioned across the road's surface. Romans used stepping stones to cross streets because the roads doubled as drainage channels. Wastewater and runoff flowed through the main streets, and citizens stepped across on raised stones, spaced precisely to allow cartwheels to pass between them. You can see the grooves worn by those cartwheels in the 1863 photographs. Smooth, deep, consistent, worn by the same daily traffic that any modern city street endures. Delivery carts, market wagons, military supply vehicles all grinding the same paths into the same stone over decades of use. Inside the bakeries, and Pompeii had over 30 bakeries for a city of 11,000 people. Carbonized loaves of bread still sat in the ovens. The Czech archaeologists found a loaf stamped with the baker's name, property of Celer, slave of Q. Granius Verus, a man enslaved whose name we know because his bread survived a volcanic eruption for 2,000 years. And on the walls outside, political graffiti, campaign advertisements painted directly onto building facades. Vote for Gaius Julius Polybius for Edile. He provides good bread. A politician campaigning on food prices to voters who could read, if in a city that wasn't supposed to have mass literacy. That's what made academics uncomfortable. Pompeii's walls proved that Roman literacy rates, even among working-class citizens, were far higher than historians had assumed, because you don't paint campaign slogans on public walls unless you expect people to read them. These photographs don't just show a dead city, and they show a living argument about who Romans actually were, and how much we'd underestimated them. And yet, Pompeii wasn't even the most significant city buried by Vesuvius that day. 30 kilometers away, a smaller, wealthier city took a completely different kind of hit, and what survived inside it is arguably the most important archaeological discovery in human history. Most people have never heard its name. I'll show you the photographs and tell you exactly what was found right after this. Herculaneum. Smaller than Pompeii, wealthier, a resort town for Rome's upper class, sitting on the bay with sea views and fine dining, and the kind of quiet that money buys. When Vesuvius erupted, Herculaneum wasn't hit with ash. It was hit with a volcanic mudflow, a superheated slurry that buried the city under 20 meters of material that hardened over centuries into something close to rock. So dense that when archaeologists discovered it in the 1700s, they had to tunnel through it like miners cutting into a mountain. What they found inside stopped excavation entirely for years. Not because of the bodies, though there were hundreds of those. It clustered on the ancient shoreline where residents had run, hoping for rescue boats that never came. It stopped because of what was inside one particular villa, the Villa of the Papyri, a private home belonging to a Roman nobleman of extraordinary wealth and intellectual ambition. And, inside it, a library. Over 1,800 papyrus scrolls. The personal collection of a man who had gathered the great thinking of the ancient world under one roof. Philosophy, poetry, science, history, and texts that existed nowhere else, from writers whose names appear in other ancient sources, but whose actual words had been lost for over 1,000 years. All of it carbonized, blackened into brittle cylinders that crumbled like burnt newspaper at the slightest touch. For centuries, those scrolls sat in museum drawers, completely unreadable, the knowledge locked inside them, potentially world-changing, physically present, but completely inaccessible. If scholars could hold them, they just couldn't open them without destroying them. Until 2023, when a team of researchers using AI-powered X-ray scanning technology, the Vesuvius Challenge, a global competition with a $250,000 prize, successfully decoded the first complete text from a sealed, unopened scroll. The words that emerged from a document buried for nearly 2,000 years were from an Epicurean philosopher named Philodemus, discussing the nature of pleasure and where true happiness actually lives. History speaking again, after 2 millennia of silence, through the patience of volcanic ash and the processing power of a machine. The early photographs of Herculaneum show something more intimate than Pompeii. Because Herculaneum was sealed so completely, so fast, the preservation was extraordinary. The wood of doors still held their grain. Paint on walls retained color that Pompeii's slower burial had faded. Walking through those excavation photographs from the 1800s, you're not looking at ruins in the traditional sense. You're looking at rooms, interrupted rooms, rooms that were mid-sentence when the world ended. Now we arrive at the image I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the one that historians call the most haunting photograph ever taken of the ancient world. It wasn't taken at Pompeii. It wasn't taken inside the Colosseum. It wasn't captured in some dramatic excavation. It was taken on a completely ordinary Roman street, and what it contains quietly connects ancient Rome to the 20th century in a way that will permanently change how you look at the world around you. The photograph was taken in Rome in 1909 on the Via Appia Antica, the Appian Way, the oldest major road in Roman history, constructed in 312 BC, built to move armies south, all built to last forever, and it did. The image shows the road stretching into the distance, lined on both sides by the crumbling mausoleums of wealthy Roman citizens. Romans were forbidden from burying the dead inside city walls, so wealthy families built elaborate tombs along the roads outside, a permanent display of status that travelers would pass for generations. But that's not what makes the photograph haunting. What makes it haunting is the ruts. Deep grooves carved into the stone road surface by chariot and cart wheels over hundreds of years of continuous use. Still perfectly visible in 1909, still measurable. And when engineers and historians measured them, the wheel ruts on Roman roads across the entire empire were consistent, standardized. Because Roman cart axles were built to a uniform width, so that every cart could navigate every road, every rut, every paved surface from Britain to Syria without adjustment. That standardized axle width was copied by medieval European wagon builders, who built their carts to fit the existing road grooves. When the first railways were built in Britain in the early 1800s, the engineers designed their track gauge to accommodate the horse-drawn wagons, already using the same paths. Wagons built to that same medieval standard, inherited from Rome. That railway gauge, 4 feet 8.5 inches, became the standard gauge adopted across the United States, then across the world. And when NASA designed the solid rocket boosters for the Space Shuttle program, the components were manufactured in Utah and shipped by rail to Florida. The rail tunnels along the route determined the maximum diameter of the boosters. The tunnel dimensions were built around the standard railway gauge, which was set by British railway engineers copying medieval wagon widths, which were set by medieval builders copying Roman road ruts. which were worn into stone by Roman carts in 312 BC. The diameter of space shuttle rocket boosters was constrained, indirectly, through an unbroken chain of inherited measurements, by the width of a Roman road. That photograph of wheel ruts on the Appian Way in 1909 is not a photograph of something dead and gone, but it is a photograph of cause and effect across 2,000 years. A civilization that fell in 476 AD, still giving quiet orders to the future, through the dimensions of a groove worn into stone by a cart that no longer exists, driven by a man whose name we will never know. Rome didn't fall. It just stopped announcing itself. If you made it this far, you're the kind of person who should subscribe, because this channel goes exactly this deep every single time.